Stephen A. Smith said he does not think the Jets are ready for 2024. Will the Jets have a successful draft? What will we do at pick 10? Free agency has kind of come to a halt for a little. I hope we see an RB2 added, maybe a couple weeks, and hope for some more news and hope for a good draft. We'll be talking about the draft and much more in today's version of NY Flight Jets Talk. Let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Here we are on a Sunday morning talking some Jets draft. We have a different style of a show today. Now, my co-host Buffalo Jet fan will be joining me. And then at 10:30, another co-host, Dom C, will be joining us. And then at 11, we'll have Mr. Matt O'Leary joining us. So trying that different style show, 3 guests in one show. Let's bring on my co-host for now, Buffalo Jet fan. Buffalo, how you doing this morning?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, finally happy. Found some time. I know we've been going back and forth for a little trying to find a date, and today it was. We got it. So let's go. Let's dive right into it. I asked this question to Ryan from Jets Talk 24/7. Just wanted to get it out of the way. Are you an O-line ogre? Are you a Bauer boy? Are you a wacky wideout? Are you team trade up? Or are you team trade down?
I didn't know of all the nicknames. I have an open mind. I think that as long as the Jets come away with a really good offensive player in this draft, that's really my main criteria. As good as I'm sure Dallas Turner or Brian Murphy may be, I want the Jets to come away with a really good offensive player. I think there's a justification to be made for offensive line, wide receiver, or Brock Bowers. If we're coming up to get somebody like Neighbors or Marvin Harrison, I could get down with that. Or if you want to slide back and get, maybe a third round pick, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah, right now I'm either probably team trade down right now. Trade up if we wasn't trade down, just because I really don't like where we are at 10, just because I feel like we're gonna miss the Harrison and Alt wave, and I feel like pick 10 marks like the second tier of kind of the star players. Like, yeah, there'll still be really solid prospects available at 10, but I feel like that kind of marks the stage 2. So I'd rather trade back or if in Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft, we gave up a second and then obviously pick 10 to move up 5 picks. If that was a package to trade up 5 and get Harrison, sign me up. I'd do that all day. But I think it's probably going to take a little more than that. And, I'd trade down. I had Trevor Sikkema of PFF on the show, and he said he could see the Jets trading as high as 5 and then trading down as low as 22. And, I'm all for trading down. I really like Troy Fautanu out of Washington because he can play guard and tackle, very versatile, move him around. But, I really think we can't stop building this offensive line. What about you, BJF?
Yeah, I mean, I think pick 10 is a little bit of no man's land, it feels like, right? Because there are the top 3 receivers, and then Joe Alt would be really good fits. Yeah, and I think there's a good amount of wide receivers and offensive linemen that'll probably be there in the late teens if you trade down and maybe take Fontenot or who knows, Fuaga, Latham, Amarius Mims, I think is a player who could be more on the table in a trade down now that you have your starters in Smith and Morgan Moses, or wide receivers like Brian Thomas Jr. So I think moving down enough to get a second round pick is probably a little bit unlikely unless there's a surprise team that's coming up for one of the top 4 quarterbacks that falls to 10. But even sliding back to, I don't know, like 13 with the Raiders, for instance, and picking up a third round pick and not missing out too much on tackle talent, I guess, depending on how you feel about Olu Fashanu. But I kind of group Olu in a similar tier with a lot of the guys after Joe Alt. I don't think there's a big gap between Olu Fashanu and I guess the next 2 tackles 3 through 5, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. And Connor Rogers released a mock draft for NBC Sports, and he was all for if the Jets really, really liked Fautanu, take him at 10, not trade back. He was all for that. He had the Jets taking Fatu at 10, and I found that really interesting. I'm big fan because very versatile, but I agree with what you're saying. You can see us trading down far enough where we get a second round pick. Let's say we trade down low into the first round. Let's say we trade with the Eagles, pick 22. What are the top guys in that kind of area for the Jets to target? I know you rattled off a few, Mims, Guyton, and those guys. So who are a few names that you like in that area?
Down at 22, probably Marius Mims, Brian Thomas Jr. Then you're in that next wave of receivers like however Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Worthy or Troy Franklin, whoever you. I think there's a lot of discrepancy between how people are going to rank the wide receivers, but there's also a lot of variance in where these offensive linemen could go. I think one of those guys, like maybe a Latham or a Fuaga, could slip in. And Brock Bowers, I'm telling you, people, he's not gonna go. He's not a top 5 pick. He's not going to be taken to the Chargers with the 5th overall pick. I think there's a good chance that Brock Bowers is closer, closer pick 20, than pick 5. And I think Brock Bowers could slide towards 18, 19, 20 very easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to go Caleb, May, Jaden, and I honestly think the Cardinals are going to trade out of 4 and get a haul for that pick. I really do see them trading out of 4. I see a team like Minnesota or Denver wanting to come up from McCarthy and then getting a haul. And I see the Chargers. If Harrison's there at 5, the Chargers are going to take him. I mean, Bowers, it was as soon as Jim Harbaugh got hired, the Bowers talks began. Jim Harbaugh loves his tight ends. He uses him like this and that, but I can assure you they're not going to go Bowers at 10. So obviously we're all talking about trading down. Trevor Sikkema said the team that's going to come up. He said he doesn't think it's going to be a quarterback. I mentioned the Eagles at pick 22. What are some other teams you think that would be interested in trading coming up and selecting at pick 10?
Well, I used to think the Steelers but now they're probably out of it now that they added 2 quarterbacks. Maybe the Bengals if they really want to come up and get, like, if they're really high on Olu Fashanu as a franchise left tackle. And there's always a surprise team. Do the Colts really want if Rome Odunze is there, I want the Jets to take him, but maybe if Odunze is there, do the Colts want to come up and get another playmaker for their young quarterback? Or even the Raiders, I think if the quarterback does fall to 10, would they want to jump? Because I believe Minnesota and Denver are right ahead of Vegas. So maybe they would want to jump those 2 quarterback needy teams to come up if JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels are there at 10.
I don't see. I really don't see McCarthy though gonna be there at 10. And I think if Odunze's there, I think the Jets have to select him. I know we have Mike Williams and we need to keep building this O-line, but I think if Odunze's there, you need to select him. So now I have a question. Are you against maybe going a Fashanu or Fuaga direction at pick 10, or do you want a playmaker, or do you want to trade back?
I'm not against either of those guys. I think there's a case to be made that both of those guys could be worthy of a top 10 pick for the New York Jets. I think if there was I'd be on the phone in that situation. Rome Odunze to me is probably just my favorite preference, given that's realistic. I don't consider Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors, or Joe Alt realistic. I think Odunze, because I'm just more confident he's going to be a good football player than any of the offensive linemen. And maybe that's just because for me, watching film, it's easier to see a wide receiver and think, okay, this is how this is going to project to the next level than it is, an offensive lineman. I'm not Brian Baldinger or Mark Schlereth or some, guy who knows exactly what to look for an offensive lineman. But receiver, it's pretty easy to see a dude who gets open and catches passes and is hard to tackle. So Rome Odunze, I think just the combination of really high floor and high ceiling and position of need and a position of immediate impact, to me, would probably be my favorite preference right now that's realistic at 10.
we're on the same page there. I've been saying all along that I like Odunze more than Neighbors. I like the big body, and big body doesn't necessarily mean a ton. I mean, Alan Lazard is a big body, and we all know how that went. But again, if you look at his film from when he was in Green Bay, it doesn't take an expert to realize he's not a capable wide receiver too. He's a 3-4 type of guy on a team. Going back to the Odunze point, I like him more than Neighbors. I'd put him as my wide receiver too, and if he's there,
Interesting.
100% need to take him. Now, if we were to trade up, would you entertain the option of trading up? Would you be interested in maybe coming up to that pick 5 spot like Jeremiah had us and selecting Harrison or a playmaker like that, or trading up and maybe getting Joe Alt? Would you be opposed to that, or would you be all in?
I think the two players I would want to trade up for are either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors are the two guys I would come up and go get. Especially if it gets, if it gets to the point where it's at 7 or 8, where maybe pick 72 could be the main thing you give up to come up. I think going up to top 5 would cost you like next year's first. Wouldn't want to do that. But if it gets to the point where like pick 72 and then a day 3 pick the following year could be what it takes, I would definitely do it for one of those receivers. I think you're on mute. I think I'm running the show. Interesting that you like Odunze over Neighbors. I prefer Neighbors. I think just release, yak ability, speed.
You got me?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, you're good.
Oh, I know something. My mic keeps the thing in my set on my computer, and then put it put it back in. But you said you prefer Neighbors over.
To Odunze, yeah. I mean, they're both really good. I just think Neighbors has a wicked release.
You got me?
It's crazy fast, and yep.
I can't.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think I got you now.
All right.
Oh yeah, I'm back. I gotta fix it. This Wi-Fi down here. Ever since I moved to my new setup, the Wi-Fi has been bad, and I have a huge lag now. But yeah, I do think Neighbors has more yak ability. I like Odunze because of his big body and the way he can make contested catches, but I think he's kind of like a Mike Williams type of guy, and going to Mike Williams and just Romo Dunze and all big body guys. I like that we brought in Mike Williams, and I really like Romo Dunze just because we had to make Garrett Wilson when he was last year. We had to make him a wide receiver that he isn't. We had to make him do things that he shouldn't need to do, and his weakness is making contested catches and getting up there and catching jump balls, and that's what we got with Mike Williams. And now, if you add Romo Dunze, you have another guy like that, and then you have a 1, 2, 3 type of that. And I like Bowers because he's not just a tight end. You can line him up in the backfield. We've seen that. He's done that a couple times in Georgia. You use him as a wide receiver. He blocks. I don't think you can go wrong with Neighbors, Bowers, or Odunze.
I agree. Oh yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I would put the receivers ahead of Bowers, but not. I'm telling you, if you're trading back to even 14 to 16, I like Bowers a little bit more. I think there will be a tackle or receiver I like better than Bowers, but it's not any slight against Bowers. He's a very fun, exciting prospect. Had a great career at Georgia. Are we good?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think he's a
Okay.
I think he's a very fun player. I think he's a
Okay.
I think he's a very fun player. You got me?
Yep, I got you.
Oh my god. I I I do think he's a very fun player, and you can use him, mix him around. And I'm all for playmaker just because this team's win now. You got to plug someone in with Rogers to come in. I mean, we have Rogers for 1, 2, max 3 years, and we need someone who we can plug them in with and make plays. But yes, I do agree with people that saying that we still need to continue to build this O line. They're right. Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith are two guys on 1 year deals. We need to continue to build this offensive line. It's not like we have this offensive line secured for 5 years down the road. I mean, we need to continue building this. But I in a championship winning offensive line, Morgan Moses probably does not start. That's why I like depth. A guy like John Simpson probably isn't starting in a championship offensive line. Those are guys who come in for injuries, but I do think they're solid pieces, and that's why I like Fashanu and Fuaga. I wouldn't be opposed to that at 10, but right now I'm really sitting team trade down just considering our options at 10.
Yeah, I think trade down is probably. I mean, if you could turn it into a second round pick, I think, and go get and do tackle and receiver in whatever order in the first and second round, I think that would be ideal. But it takes two to tango there.
Yeah, tackle that would yeah. I really like that. Like the McConkeys, Roman Wilson might go in the second round. Someone like that, I really like both those guys. So that leads me to my next question in the second round. What are your thoughts on a guy like Lad McConkey, or let's say they were to trade back into like 28, that 30 kind of area? What do you like a Keon Coleman type of guy? I know you weren't too high on him a couple months ago. Have you changed your opinion on him, or do you like a McConkey type of guy? Who are your top guys in that kind of late first round, early second round for wide receivers? I know you mentioned Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr., Worthy, those guys, but what about late first round, early second round?
Well, because there was talk about Keon Coleman, like potentially a pick 10 for the Jets, like a couple months ago, which I think is egregious. I think that he
Yeah,
has
that's
bad
not
hands.
gonna
He has a lot
happen.
a lot of drops and poor contested catchability. But I mean, no, I would still, even if you trade back to the first round, there are still guys I would like over uh Keon Coleman. I would take Lad over him. I would take I would take Adonai Mitchell over him. Um I would take Troy Franklin over him. So there's a handful of guys I would rather take over Keon Coleman. I think if you're gonna be right, if you're gonna win with catch radius, like you have to be really special at that. Like Odunze wins a lot, and Odunze is a good route runner, and he can separate okay, he has decent yak ability, but he mainly wins kind of how DeAndre Hopkins wins, and you have to have really special hands and body control for it to be a wide receiver one at the next level, with that being your bread and butter. And Odunze does, and I just don't see those traits out of Keon Coleman. He seems like an upgraded Alan Lazard to me, which we don't want one of those in the first or second round.
I agree. I look at him kind of as an upgrade to Alan Lazard a little, but I do think he's talented. But the talk, I agree. I didn't really catch much of that. The talk of him at 10 with the Jets, but that's absolute nonsense. There's no way he should be in for the 10th overall pick. And I late first round, early second round guy. But Buffalo, thank you for joining us. Any final
Hey,
thoughts?
anytime, man. Just keep grinding, doing what you're doing. You got a great thing going. Jealous of your backdrop there with your nice framed jerseys. So thanks for having me on, man. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate it. I don't think he's jealous of this Wi-Fi that I have going on. I don't know what is happening. I keep losing signal. But guys, Dom C will be I'll go into the chat now. But Dom C will be joining us in 7 minutes. Guys, I think I am gonna restart stream when Dom C comes on. At my I'm gonna leave the studio. I'm gonna leave the thing on StreamYard, and I'll come back. I might need to restart a new stream, but thank you guys for watching. See you in a couple minutes. You guys got me? I have rebooted the router. Here I am. Hope that our second guest is joining the show after a great 20 minutes with Buffalo Jet fan, with the exception of my Wi-Fi down here. Let's bring on Dom C of Project Connect. Dom, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, Connor, I'm good, man. I'm good. finally getting the chance to make this happen. I mean, we've been going back and forth now for a few weeks, so I'm glad we can chop
Yes,
it up, and I'm glad I can, we got the time that makes it work, man.
I agree. First time on the show. I
That's
hope
right.
hope we can get you on. But here we are. We're in the middle of middle of draft season right now. First thing before we get started, that's a Wesley Walker signed jersey behind you, right?
It is. It is. Wesley Walker was one of my
Love-
dad's favorite players.
Love that jersey. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Wesley is a great guy, good friend of the show. Really like him. But we're gonna start with a question from Joe Mike. Can Dom C talk in detail if there's a big drop off from the top three? Harrison, Neighbors, Adonai Mitchell, I think he's saying. Or yeah.
So I mean, we're talking about the wide receivers. I think that there's a drop off after the top two. I think Neighbors and MHJ are kind of a tier above anybody else. A tier. There's a big gap between that next tier. I know a lot of people like Rome Odunze, and I think Rome Odunze is a great player as well. He's my third ranked wide receiver in the class. But I think that the drop off between guys like Neighbors and Harrison to Odunze is, in my opinion, pretty significant. Maybe not in others, and that's fine too. But yeah, from Odunze to my wide receiver 4 is AD Mitchell, to my wide receiver 5, who's Xavier Worthy, to my wide receiver 6, who's Brian Thomas. Let me pull up my board here. I mean, I think my wide receiver 7 is Troy Franklin. 8 is McConkey. I think they're all really, really good players. But I think that Harrison and Neighbors offer something different. I think they offer something special. I think those two guys can come in and truly be alpha ones on their team. And I've said this before, not to you, obviously, Connor, because it's our first time chatting. But there's only two guys that I would, if the Jets were at 10, there's only two guys that I would trade up for, and that's Harrison or Neighbors. I'm not saying I'm not suggesting that they do, or I'm not suggesting that they will, but those are the two guys that I would trade up for. There's nobody else in this draft class that I would trade up for.
So those Harrison and Neighbors are the two guys you trade up for. So we have different opinions here. I personally am a huge fan of Rome Odunze. I really like him. I probably have him as my wide receiver too. I just think his big body, he can go up, make contested catches. I think kind of like Mike Williams in a way, obviously, who we just brought in.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about bringing in Mike Williams, I said this to Buffalo Jet fan, and also what I like about Odunze is last year with this team, we had to make Garrett Wilson a wide receiver that he really isn't. We had to have him literally do everything possible that a wide receiver could do. Catch balls, make contested catches, get up there. And he's really not that type of receiver. He's a guy who's going to make you miss in the slot and be a deep ball threat, versus Mike Williams and Rome Odunze, both of them bring that versatility that they're big bodies. They're going to go up there, get the jump balls, get contested catches, go one-on-one against a corner. That's what I like about both of them. I think Neighbors is really solid. He is on the smaller side, but size to me, it matters a little, but it's not the make or break in a wide receiver. Factor the whole size doesn't matter. And if you look, Alan Lazard's a big body, so he's not producing numbers. I think the size has an impact on the player you are, but I think all of it is really route running. Jump balls are important, but nowadays it's about making corners miss and stuff like that. So obviously you just mentioned the drop off from the three wide receivers. Who do you have below them? Who's in that second tier? Is it Brian Thomas Jr.? Is it Adonai Mitchell? Is it Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey? Who are those type of guys?
AD Mitchell is my fourth wide receiver, and I think I like him relative. AD Mitchell, I'll say this. I know that Combine came and he flew up a lot of people's charts the way he tested, but he's been my number 4 wide receiver pretty much throughout the whole draft cycle. 4 or 5. I had Troy Franklin up there a little bit, but as I reevaled and went through before I set my final rankings, I bumped Troy Franklin down a little bit, and I solidified AD Mitchell. I think AD Mitchell has I think he's a guy that's going to be a really, really even better pro than he was in college. He offers everything that you talked about.
Ooh.
Mike, you offer. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you said something. I apologize. But you talked about like Mike Williams.
I said, that's interesting.
Yeah, you talked about Mike Williams and Rome Odunze being those, those big, that in essence, those X-build prototypes, those boundary receivers that are going to go up and pluck the ball and contest the catch. I think AD Mitchell does that. I think he offers even more athleticism. I think he's even more of a nuanced route runner. Not the best, but more nuanced. I just think AD Mitchell is kind of a mix of a guy like T. Higgins, and what he does on the boundary, and even in CeeDee Lamb. If you combine those two, if they had a love child, CeeDee Lamb and Mike Higgins, you'd get a guy like AD Mitchell. His stock in the pros is going to be, going straight up. Like I said, the athleticism that he shows, very, very good hands. He's got, enough long speed to beat you. He's nuanced enough to get off of press coverage, which is something that, for me, when I'm going through these, this prospect film, the one thing my eye leans towards is guys that can create separation. And for me, that's why I think AD Mitchell is a lot closer to Rome Odunze than most, because I know that he can get off of press man coverage off the line. He's got a good release package. I'm questionable on how Rome is going to adjust. I'm not saying he can't do it, but there's going to be an adjustment period for him doing that. They both have great hands. And listen, I don't think you can go wrong in that second tier of receivers. And I'll keep the top 3 as the top 3, and we'll just say, for argument's sake, they're one tier. I don't think you can go wrong in that second tier receiver. It just really kind of comes down to what type of receiver do you want? Do you want that true deep threat, the guy that's going to burn you on the outside? Then you might lean Brian Thomas. Do you want a guy who's shifty, jitterbug-esque, can win at all 3 levels? Then you might lean to guys like Ladd McConkey or Xavier Worthy. And do you want kind of a blend of both? Then you're going to lean towards guys like AD Mitchell. So it really just depends on what fits your scheme and what you already have on the team. And I talked about separation. I tend to think that the guys that can create their own separation have a tendency to really adjust easier and play better at the next level. We talked about Brian Thomas very, very briefly. He had great numbers for a year, and he had a Heisman winning quarterback. But I don't know if he's going to continue that ascend, or if he's kind of plateaued. He could be the next Corey Davis, where he goes, super high and just has kind of like a mid-career. I wouldn't be shocked if that was the outcome for a guy like Brian Thomas. Whereas the other guys I talked about, the Mitchells and the Worthies and, the McConkeys of the world, I think that they're just so in the ropes, just cut in their teeth, and we haven't even seen the type of players that they can become.
Yeah, I agree with those tiers. Obviously, I really agree with what you're saying. Those 1-2 tiers, I really don't think you can go wrong. But a name I'm going to mention, who's probably going to be a 3rd, 4th round pick type of guy, is Malik Washington, wide receiver. GM Green Bean's really high on him. What are your thoughts on Malik Washington, and what do you think about him? Obviously, you saw him play in Mobile, and you saw Ladd McConkey. You really saw when you were in Mobile, his stock was here. Same with Roman Wilson at pre-Mobile here, post-Mobile through the roof. So what were your thoughts on a guy like Malik Washington? Obviously, you mentioned the Roman Wilson type of guys.
Well, Washington wasn't in Mobile. He actually played at the Shrine Bowl. But I will say this.
That's what it was.
I'm a huge fan. Yes, he's a little bit smaller in regards to height, in regards to arm length, so that circumference, that the catch radius is going to be a little bit smaller than ideal. But man, when you talk about guys, I talked about it in Xavier Worthy. When you talk about guys that can win at all three levels, they can win in the short stuff. When you have mesh concepts, the crossing patterns and the stuff like that, or in the perimeter, the swing passes, the bubble screens. When you talk about guys that can win in the intermediate routes, that's your ins, your outs, your hitches, your comebacks, so on and so forth. And then the guys that can still take you deep. I mean, Malik Washington hits that, checks off all those boxes. At 5'8.5", he's pushing 200 pounds. The guy is yoked up. He's a rock. He's pure muscle. Put the ball in his hands, and the way he plays and the way he runs through contact. He's not going to get pushed off of his routes, by more physical press coverage guys. He's extremely, extremely good tracking the deep ball, as well as, those tight window concentration catches. The thing with Malik Washington is that, like I said, he's really just slot specific. So there's going to be a lot of teams that aren't going to value someone who's typecasted as just one thing as a lot, which is why I think Malik Washington could last until the end of the third, maybe even into the fourth round. But whoever takes him is going to get one hell of a player. I don't expect. Listen, it's hard. It's impossible to predict. And if anyone predicts, so on and so forth as the next Puka Nacua, that you can turn the page. But I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Malik Washington came in and had a year, and a year of effectiveness such as Josh Downs did, or such as Tank Dell did before he get hurt. Like that's the kind of player and that's the kind of production that I expect to see from Malik Washington year one. Like he's a ball player through and through. He's a ball player. If he wasn't so limited in his height and his catch radius, this is a guy you'd talk about on day two. You talked about Roman Wilson and Ladd McConkey, where they started here, and after the Senior Bowl, they ended up here. And I think that they proved why that happened was, they proved wrong what the narrative was about them coming in, that they were just slot-specific guys. They were going to need to be their separation was going to need to be forced by scheme, by motion, so on and so forth. That's not the case. I think both of those guys showed that they could play inside. They have inside-outside versatility. They showed release packages off of press man. They show that they can their nuance in the way they run their routes and sink their hips and don't stop and change their tempo and their pace of their breaks and so on and so forth. These are all the nuanced stuff that you want to see in next level wide receivers. Roman Wilson, showed that he catches anything thrown within, a country mile of him. I mean, the guy has body control and concentration like no other. I just think that, they proved, they went to Mobile and they proved the narrative wrong. And I think that's why you're going to hear these guys. I mean, McConkey's even getting talked about, late first round. I don't necessarily think he'll fall there, but, by the top 50, I think both of these guys will be off the board.
I agree with what you're saying. I think Malik Washington's very solid. If you look at him play, I mean, yeah, he was down at the Shrine Bowl. I think he's a solid player. You mentioned guys falling with Malik Washington possibly coming into the fourth round. Who are some other players right now that people think are going to go higher, and you're like, no, I think this guy has the potential to fall? Buffalo Jet fan used the example of Bowers. He said he thinks Bowers has a better chance of being selected at pick 20 than he does at pick 5, just because he thinks Bowers will be available in that 20 area. What is it? Who are some guys you look at and you're like, this guy has the potential to fall down draft boards?
Are we talking about wide receivers or are you talking about any position?
Any player.
Man, who is so if I'm understanding you right, Connor, who are guys that we as fans or maybe even in the media are higher on than I think NFL teams will be higher on? I think
yes, that
I think Keon Coleman is one. For sure. I think that again, super athletic. Going to be very, very limited in his role. He's not going to be a fit for most a lot. He's not a plug and play in a lot of offensive schemes. I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped down into the middle of second round. You know, off of the wide receivers. I mean, I think that I don't think you're going to see a running back taken very early at all. I mean, I know that's kind of a broad dart throw there, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's one, maybe running back taken in the first 2 rounds. I think those guys are going to drop. Let's see. Who's a guy that we're higher on? Yeah, I mean, listen, I think positionally, I know I won't harp on names in particular. I think positionally, well, actually, I can harp on one name that I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's not that big of a drop, but I think there's a lot of first round buzz around Arizona offensive lineman Jordan Morgan. I don't think he's a lock to go in the first round at all.
Yep.
I don't think he'll last off the board too long into the second, especially with some of the teams there that could use some tackle help, as in New England, Washington, so on and so forth. But to me, he's not a lock to go in the first round. I actually think he's probably going to transition and play inside at the next level and not stay outside at tackle. So he's a guy I think is probably getting a little bit more love. Overall, I'd probably say, the running back. Ooh, camera down. I'd say the running backs, and you're good, dude. I'd say the running backs and the safeties are probably the 2 positions that you can expect these guys to kind of plummet a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me, like I said, if there was, maybe one running back taken in the first 2 rounds, maybe one safety. Maybe 2 safeties at tops that might be pushing it, but I think those 2 positional groups are going to go lower than a lot of people expect.
You mentioned Keon Coleman, and Buffalo Jet fan was talking about Keon Coleman, how there were apparently a couple months ago talks about him going at 10, and I didn't hear those talks, but that's nonsense. He's not going to be selected at pick 10. I can guarantee you that. I think Keon Coleman's very talented, though. Bigger body, but big body. Like I said, it's not the end all be all. But interesting that you said he can fall down draft boards. Now, who are some guys that you think who we think are kind of down here? Who you think NFL GMs are gonna be high on? I mean, some guys have been on the rise as of late. Xavier Worthy after his combine, and JPJ after the combine and the Senior Bowl. I mean, he was expected to go in the second round, mid-second round, and now he's in my opinion a lock for the first round. And if the Eagles don't trade out of that spot, I think he's a lock for the Eagles at 22.
Yeah, I don't even know if JPJ reaches 22. I might differ in guys that I think will, I don't think the Eagles will lean that way, but that's for a different conversation. Guys that I think are going to go a lot higher than we expect. I think Spencer Rattler's one. I think the NFL is a lot higher on Spencer Rattler than we are as quote unquote casual fans. A lot of people just, do their scouting based on, the box scores. And, if you watch Spencer Rattler, listen, it's a work in progress. I think there's a lot to be cleaned up, but the South Carolina offense last year was the offensive line was pretty bad. I mean, Spencer Rattler was under fire so much faster than anyone would have ever anticipated. So if you look at the numbers, he wasn't good. You look at some of the completion percentage, wasn't good. But I think if you put him in a competent offense, I think he's got a lot of the intangibles. I know maturity was a big thing with Spencer Rattler early on, but I think he's proven that he's through that. I think he's got the arm talent to play in the NFL. Listen, do I think he's an all-pro player? No, but I think he can be a viable starter. He's a guy that it wouldn't surprise me at all if he goes round 2. I wouldn't be shocked, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's a team that really believes in his traits and what he can develop to, that they trade up to the end of round 1 over a guy like Michael Penix or so on and so forth. So he's one. I think that I think that the tackles are going to go in a different order than what we're expecting. I think a guy like Armarius Mims could go a lot higher than we know. And again, that's just based on, a lot of these teams look at projection and traits, and they're going to bet and bank on the traits. Now, Armarius Mims is 21 years old, going to be 21 years old. He was a true junior. He could have went back to college. To me, I think that him and his agents or his agency, probably got some good intel that he was going to be taken early, which is probably why that pushed him to go out. So I think he could go earlier than expected. It wouldn't surprise me if he's off the board before the names like it really wouldn't surprise me if he was off the board before the names like Fuaga and Latham and Fatnell. Because the team's going to see him as a true left tackle of the future. So those are two names that I think are probably going higher. And then I'll dig a little deeper. One of my absolute favorite prospects in this entire draft cycle is cornerback Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. I have him as my 5th ranked cornerback. I think he's a lock to go. Well, I shouldn't say he's a lock. Everyone, if Connor, a lot of people judge what they feel about where somebody's going to go based on mock draft simulators and what they see in mock drafts. But to me, he's a round 2. He's an early day 2 cornerback. He's going to be taken probably as, the 6th or 7th cornerback off the board, 5th or 6th cornerback off the board, which is probably going to be, middle to late round 2. He offers everything that you want. A physical, aggressive, 6'2", 200 pounds, hip fluidity, can play, plays, zone. He's not scheme specific, so he can press up on you. He can play, off coverage and off, play zone very well. He's super, super aggressive, coming downhill, plays with anticipation and really solid against run defender. For me, I know I'm outside of the scope of normal when it comes to this. You're like, with the Jets, you talk about a lot of, trade down and figure out how to get more capital so he can get back up in round 2. Like, he's a guy that I'm targeting. I would love, I think he would fit perfect in our defense. I think he would be a perfect guy to add to transition, to take the place of DJ Reed next year if DJ Reed is not extended, which to me at this point, if they haven't done it, I'm starting to question if they're going to do it at all, especially with Michael Carter and Sauce due for big paydays. I don't think they're going to pay 3 cornerbacks. So cornerback is something I think they're going to target earlier than we expect. And a guy like Cam Hart, I think, would be an absolutely home run pick for the Jets in this scheme.
Obviously, you mentioned cornerback there. There was a mock draft that was put out, and Jets Twitter was kind of going wild over it. It had the Jets selecting Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa, at pick 10. What were your thoughts on that mock draft? And could you, in any world, see the Jets selecting DeJean at pick 10?
Well, I'll say this. Joe Douglas will surprise us. He did last year with Will McDonald. I don't think anybody had Will McDonald pegged to the Jets in round 1 last year. However, that being said, no, I don't. And I'll explain to you why. I think DeJean kind of settles in next in the NFL as kind of that hybrid post safety / slot cornerback. Think of like Brian Branch in Detroit. I think that's the role that DeJean plays at the next level. Not a true, free safety, not a true outside cornerback, kind of that hybrid, more slot than not. And if you just look at the Jets roster, they brought back Chuck Clark to kind of play that, that hybrid rover, that big nickel box, this hybrid linebacker safety role. And they also have Michael Carter, who's locked in as, one of arguably the top 5 slot cornerbacks in the NFL. So I don't see where DeJean fits the Jets per se. And I just don't see that they're going to go that high at that position anyway. Joe Douglas has shown to me a propensity not to really value the safety position all that much. That he's going to, spend high draft capital or spend high in free agency at that role. So So yeah, I don't think DeJean's coming to the Jets, especially not at 10.
Yeah, I definitely think it's either O-line, Bowers, wide receiver, trade up or trade down. Those are really the only options I see. So now I'm gonna get into mock draft that Daniel Jeremiah released with the Jets trading up to pick 5 and getting Harrison. The
Uh-huh.
Jets only giving up pick 10 and a second round pick. I mean, could you see that possibly happening? Obviously, Jeremiah covers the Chargers. He does radio for them. And he only had the Jets giving up a second round pick and obviously pick 10 to go up and get Harrison. And if that's a package to go and get Harrison, I'm doing that all day.
Yeah, well, does the value work? Yes, I think the value works. I also think that if the Chargers are open for business, that I think somebody's going to beat that. Somebody's going to beat that package, and the Jets don't have the capital this year to really beat it. As I told you before, Harrison and Neighbors are probably the only two guys that I'd figure out how to trade up for, and I think it'll be interesting. Because I know a lot more Jets fans are now on the trade up bandwagon now that Jeremiah put that out, so on and so forth. But I think that would really show, like this terminology of all in, all in the Aaron Rodgers window is being, kind of tattooed onto us as a fan base in the Jets universe. That to me, epitomizes what an all-in move is. Like, listen, you really want to go for it now, whether it's just this year, whether it's the next 2 years, like that's the kind of move that you make. Joe Douglas's free agency so far and its contracts, and its contract builds have shown that, yeah, they're like, you know what, he's doing everything in this 1 to 2 year window. A move like that where you're trading up to go get a guy like Harrison or even a Neighbors or something like that would really show that the Jets are really going for it, that they're all in. Right now, they say they're all in. They're making moves that kind of hover on the outside of the scope of all in. It's a move like that would really kind of shove the chips into the middle. Do I think it's realistic? Do I think it could happen? Sure, it could happen. If I was betting, I'd probably say no. But I wouldn't be upset about it. Obviously, you go get a guy. I mean, Harrison's the number 2 player, on my board, period, overall. So, you go get a guy, and Neighbors is number 3. So you go get a guy like Harrison or Neighbors. They're top 3 players for me overall. I'm not going to be upset about it. And to me, that would really show what all in means.
It would 100% show what all in means. And we knew going into this offseason that Joe Douglas was going to be playing for his job. If he doesn't make the playoffs, and I think it's more than making the playoffs, I think it's winning a game or games and, hopefully going to a Super Bowl or going to an AFC championship and having success in the playoffs. And if he doesn't win one game in the playoffs, I think this regime is done. And that would show that he is investing, like you said, in a win now team, going all in, trying to win the Super Bowl this year, and just plugging anyone he could possibly in, all in, getting a weapon, trading up, showing that he is playing for his job, and he is going all in for the Super Bowl and not really building for the future. But our last question before we let you go: are you an O-line ogre, Bauer boy, wacky wideout, team trade up, or team trade down? Right now, I'm leaning towards trade down.
Listen, well, here's the thing. I think on paper, ideally, trade down for the fan makes the most sense because, if you can move down a couple spots and still fall with somebody you're comfortable with and gain some more capital, that obviously, would be win-win. The problem is if 4 quarterbacks are off the board in the top 5, I just don't know who's trading up. I don't know who there's going to be the people are going to be there to trade up. I think if you trade down, I think there's a couple reasonable options here, Connor. I think Indianapolis at 15, or I think Jacksonville at 17 makes sense. And the reason why they make sense is I think that those 2 teams could trade up to go get the cornerback, the defensive back of their choice off the board first before that run starts. So to me, those are really the only two trade back possibilities. Denver's not going to trade up because they're not going to go get, I don't see anybody that they're trading up for. Plus, they have avoiding capital. So does New Orleans. So I think those two teams trading up are off the board. The Raiders, maybe, but what are they trading up for? If there was McCarthy still on the board, then you can make that argument. But I just don't know who's trading up. I think if anybody's going to trade up, they're going to trade up to go get their first cornerback off the board. And to me, that's the Colts at 15 or Jacksonville at 17. So, yeah, would I trade down? Sure, I guess I would. But I lean towards what I would do is take an offensive lineman. Take a guy who has some flexibility or versatility that can, come in and offer help inside or outside. I'm all aboard team JC Latham. I know you talked to Buffalo beforehand. He and I have kind of like the same mindset. I think he's a lot better than people are want to believe. They look at size, and it's not just that. I think JC Latham can come in. I think he can play left tackle. I think he can play right tackle. I think he can play inside at guard. So I would lean that way. If I was a betting man, though, I think the Jets probably move. I think it's more realistic that they go Bowers, whether it's at 10 or if they trade back to Indianapolis at 15. I think Bowers is going to be probably more likely target than I would have believed 2 weeks ago. So gun to my head, I'm choosing an O lineman. Realistically, I think Bowers is right now it's probably a 50-50 coin flip between Bowers and an O lineman. I don't think wide receiver is going to be on the board. I don't think the three in Neighbors Odunze or Harrison will be there at 10. Sure, if there's a way to entertain, if one of those guys drops to 8 and you want to see if you can make that happen, I'm all for it. But again, I think that's probably a little bit more unrealistic. I think those wide receivers are off the board even before 8. And that's where we stand, man. That's where I'd lean towards. I would choose an offensive lineman. I would choose one that's versatile, and it really just depends how they have them. They have them rated. If they have a bunch of guys, if they have a tier that has Fontenot and Fuaga and Latham and Mims all on the same board, then trade down and hope to land one of those afterwards. I'm losing you, Connor. I think you're cutting out.
Got me?
Yeah. You're just lagging a little bit. That's all.
All right, yeah, I'm all for trading down, but Dom C, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Any final thoughts?
No, man. Hey, it was a pleasure, guys. If you're not following Connor, go ahead and do it. The kid's, he's putting in the Lord's work here, getting all these big names and really grinding out there. I'm happy to see it. Listen, man, draft is probably 30 days away. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen. Just stay tuned and enjoy whoever we're going to get. Whatever it is, whether it's at 10 or whether it's trade down, we're going to get a good player. So that's what I'm pretty stoked about. So thanks, Connor. I appreciate the time, man.
Of course, thank you for hopping on. I really, really appreciate it. That was Dom C of Project Prospect joining us to talk some draft. Now let's bring on our next co-host, Mr. Matt O'Leary, and it is not letting me add him to the stage. So what is happening right now? Guys, I'm going to leave the studio and return. I have no idea what is happening with my Wi-Fi. Stay tuned. I've relocated, guys. I'm so sorry. I got a new laptop because my other one was not working too well. Other one worked fine in that backdrop. This one not so much. So I hope this works. But long time awaiting after that whole Wi-Fi saga. Let's bring my other co-host on, Mr. Matt O'Leary. Matt, how you doing this morning?
I am doing good. Thank you so much for having me out, Connor.
Of course, I really appreciate you stopping by. We had a caller on the line. It was Bobby, and then Bobby left, rightfully so, as I was juggling my Wi-Fi and I had to relocate. But let's hop right into it. We're going to talk about first the Shaq Barrett news. Obviously, you released your video on it. I haven't picked anyone's brain on it yet. What were your thoughts on that, and how he said he was this close to coming to the Jets, and then obviously the Jets didn't land him. So what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it would have been a nice addition for the Jets to add someone like Shaq Barrett, but I think if the Jets end up pivoting and sign Jadeveon Clowney, that might end up being the better move for them, because Clowney was a better pass rusher last year, and granted, over the course of their careers, Shaq Barrett in his prime is a better pass rusher than Jadeveon Clowney, but both, kind of on the back nine of their careers, and I think what Jadeveon gives you on early downs as a run defender might be more valuable. And might improve on something that the Jets need right now. So if I had my choice, I think Jadeveon's the better player at this point in 2024. So it's not going to be the worst things in the world if they end up having to pivot and sign Jadeveon.
Yeah, I really like Clowney, and it was reported that the visit went well, and Jordan Schultz reported the Jets are highly motivated to sign Clowney. But Matt, our caller is back on the line. Should we go to our caller?
Let's do it.
And here he is. Oh,
You guys are awesome. Matt, how you doing, Matt?
What's going on? How are you, Bobby?
Good to see you guys. You guys are awesome as Jet fans. I'm a Giant fan, but I do cheer for the Jets. But I think they should go after Joe Alt. Is there any way they could go up to get Joe Alt?
Well, if they were to trade up, but there's no way he's falling to 10. I'll let you go on this one, Matt.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think they would have to trade up to get him. I don't think he makes.
You don't think they're going to trade up to get him?
It'd be a tough move, I think, to get him to trade up that high, unless like your Giants are looking to trade back, because I think
if the Giants, I'll take him. I want him on my team. You guys don't want him? I'll take him. Because I wanted Zach Martin when he went to the Dallas Cowgirls. I wanted them to pick him up instead of who they picked up. I wanted Zach Martin that time. So, of course, they screw me up. But the Jets looking good this year.
Were you
What?
Were you a fan of the Andrew Thomas pick in 2021?
Andrew Thomas. Yeah, he was all right, but I think we could get a better pick than that. And then also, I think, can I give you my prediction of your record this year?
Let's hear it.
Of course.
11-6.
Ooh.
I'll take that.
I like.
Matt, what would you do if the Jets went 11-6?
I would be very happy with an 11-6 season. I think if you look at how the division shapes up, that they probably have a good chance to win it if they win 11 games. I think the Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins are all kind of going to be between 9 and 11 wins. So I'd be happy with that.
I tell you, they're going to beat Patriots twice. They beat Buffalo twice. And then maybe Miami once.
Ooh.
So that's my prediction.
Bobby,
I'm
thank
not
you for the
give you
call.
the
You got any
Giants
final
prediction.
thoughts?
Yeah, you guys are awesome, like I said. A+, both of you. Guys, got to subscribe to their channels.
Thank you.
They're both great guys. Talking to them are the best thing I ever do. Okay, have a good day, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Bobby. Great call by Bobby. Matt, when I heard the record prediction by a Giants fan, the first thing that came to my mind is when you were at MetLife Stadium and you interviewed the Giants fan, and you said, "What is the Jets' record going to be?" You didn't know he was a Giants fan, and he's like, 3-14. What's your hot take? Flacco's going to start the whole year. How many touchdowns does Zach throw? 3. Would you be happy with this season or whatever? No, you said, what would you do to see a Jets Super Bowl? He said, I couldn't care less. I'm a Giants fan. And I was like, oh my God. But that was his hot take, was Flacco was going to start the whole year. And the only flash I saw from Flacco that year was the Browns game. That Browns game was legendary. And then we saw him smoke us on primetime in a Browns uniform this year.
Yeah. What are the odds of that? That's a crazy one that it ended up happening that way. But yeah, that was a great interview. I had no idea that he was a Giants fan. He was there hanging out with a bunch of Jet fans in the parking lot, and I was just talking to people. But it made for a really good video, so I thank him for that.
Yeah, that was legendary. I'm 2021, so that was 2 years ago now. That's 3. Well, that was 22, I think. 2-3 years ago, whatever it was. It's crazy that 2020 was 4 years ago now, looking at it. But we got another caller on the line. Aurora is joining the show. Aurora, how are you doing today? Oh, I think we lost her. I think we lost Aurora. But you guys got me. My Wi-Fi is still not 100% here.
You're a little delayed coming through on my end. There's a little bit of like a delay.
Yeah, I think it's the lag, but gotta find a way to get this lag fixed. New laptop. My other one was working fine down there, and she's back on the line.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, how you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So where I'm at, so I'm in Dallas, but I grew up in New Jersey. I'm a big Jets fan. Dad was a season ticket holder for many years. But so my only Jets fandom really, like, that was a success was during the 09 and 010 season. But where I'm at with this draft right now is, so we have a new identity on the offensive line, okay? Let's kind of make that out there. We have 3 new people that have joined us and all great additions right now. And the way I would go with the draft is I want to draft who's going to be our identity right now, like who's in our identity now with that. And I still think we need to trade back. I still think we need to get a second-round pick right now. But which out of the 2 categories will, and then like the players that are in those categories, like fit in our identity, and what spot do we take them is where my brain is going at right now. So I just kind of want to toss it to you all and get you guys' thoughts about that.
I love
All right,
it.
thank you. Appreciate the call. So Matt, what was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think Aurora is spot on with the additions on the offensive line. They do have an identity. They're going to be a much more physical, grueling team, I think. And it's someone that's been linked to the Jets a lot this offseason. Talisi Fuaga really fits that bill with how he plays on the offensive line. They could probably take him at 10, or even if they slide back a couple of spots, I think he would still be on the board for them to draft. And I know that they have all their starters, filled out on the offensive line right now, but the chances of Morgan Moses or Tyron Smith playing a full season is pretty slim. And with Fuaga, what I like is he can play both guard and tackle. So I know that there's a little bit of fear that if you were to draft a lineman in the first round, he wouldn't play right away. But I think with the number of injuries that this team has suffered the last couple of years, that he's going to get on the field at some point. And I think he's to me the name that I think fits their new identity on the offensive line the best.
Yep, I agree. Personally, my number 1 option would be right now is trading back and selecting Troy Fautanu. That's realistic. I'm all in. I love Rome Odunze. He's my wide receiver too. I put him ahead of Malik Neighbors, but I was all for trading up 1 or 2 picks for him before they signed Williams. But now that they signed Williams, I'm I don't want to trade up for him. And if we were to trade up, I'd trade up to pick 5 and select Marvin Harrison, just because if if we could trade up with the package that Jeremiah had us giving up, sign me up all day. Obviously pick 10, and then next year's second to go up 5 picks and get Harrison. I'd 100% do that. But where do you sit on this situation? Wacky Whiteout, Bauer Boy, O-line Ogre, trade up, trade down. Where are you?
Yeah, I think trade down is my favorite option, but the best thing about where the Jets are right now is I don't think there's really a wrong answer. I think you can make a strong case for them, moving down and taking multiple swings, or if they stay put, drafting Bowers would be a lot of fun, adding him to this offense, or adding offensive line depth, I think is a smart decision. And same thing with the wide receivers. So with how the Jets handled free agency, I think that they're in a spot where they have a few directions that they can go that makes sense. And they're not kind of stuck in, they have to take this one particular position at pick number 10. So they have options, which I think is the best part.
Yeah, something I mentioned to Dom C before we let him go was the mock draft that had the Jets selecting cornerback Cooper DeJean from Iowa at pick 10 overall. And I said, could you see in any world where the Jets select DeJean at pick 10? He goes, I'm not gonna say anything, but no one predicted Will McDonald to the Jets last year. See, I do find DeJean very unlikely. I don't see the Jets going in a cornerback direction, especially in the first round. I think it's either going to be the O-line Ogre, a Bauer Boy, a Wacky Whiteout, or they're going to trade up or they're going to trade down. And I think the smart option would be to trade down, but I think the Jets are going to stay at pick 10.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And with DeJean, that would be wild to me. I think that would be absolutely nuts if that's what they decided to do. I don't see it. They're in a win now window. Yeah, so I think that it's got to be something on the offensive side of the ball. They can't go defense again.
I 100% agree. And it's going to be one of those positions, straight up, trade down, O-line, wideout, Bowers. I know everyone's like, people who don't like Bowers are like, we don't need another tight end. And, I'm with those guys. We don't need another tight end. But you look at Bowers, he's not just a tight end. They play him in the backfield. He blocks. He plays receiver. He does a little bit of everything. But, staying with the tight end and the Jets, what I don't understand from Jet fans is the Tyler Conklin hate. I think Tyler Conklin is incredible. I think he's not incredible, but he fits this team perfectly. I think he had 600 yards last year. So it was a career high or something for him. I think he's solid. Get Ruckert involved, and I don't think Kuntz is going to play a ton next year. I think Yeboah is probably going to be the tight end 3. But what do you have to say to the people that on Twitter have been saying that if Bowers comes in, he will be the tight end 3 for the Jets?
I don't think that would be the case. I think they'd find a way to utilize Brock Bowers if they drafted him, because as you said, he's not just your typical inline tight end. He could line up in the slot, out wide, in the backfield as an H-back, all these different kind of areas, and he's kind of like a chess piece. You move him around the offensive side of the ball. But I do like Tyler Conklin. I think he had 621 yards with the worst quarterback play in the league last year. I think with Rodgers, you could pencil him in between somewhere 700 to 800 yards and maybe 5 to 6 touchdown catches next season. I think he would be a really nice safety blanket for Rodgers, and I would like to see him with a real quarterback, because the last 2 years I think he's put up some productive numbers in just a really bad situation, and I don't think he was utilized well. So I'm not out on Tyler Conklin. I think he's a good player. If the Jets decided that they still wanted to go Bowers, I get it. That's fine. I'm not against that thought process, but if they don't, I don't think it's a massive failure, because I think Tyler Conklin could be productive as a tight end 1 in this offense.
I think he could be very productive. And if you look, 621 yards, like you mentioned, and to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you have the stats up, but he didn't score a touchdown last year, if I'm correct. I know he had a couple in 2022, but he didn't have a touchdown last year. And, a guy like Rodgers is only going to make him better. And, the whole staying with the topic of Rodgers and making players better, the whole Allen Lazard stuff, Jake Asman has had a perfect perspective on it. you can't count on him for anything. Every yard that you get from him is a bonus, and I think that's a great way to look at that. But that's not a way you look at a player making $11 million a year. That's a way you should be looking at, like, Xavier Brownlee or Xavier Gibson. And, call me crazy, but I honestly put Xavier Gibson over Alan Lazard on this depth chart.
Yeah, I think you should, because he was better last year than Alan Lazard, as crazy as that is. Now, maybe like the optimist view on the 2024 season is that maybe like Lazard could be closer to what he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and that makes you feel a little bit better about the contract. But I don't think you could guarantee that, or look at it going into next year as that's a guarantee, which is why, I think we both want them to be active to add another receiver at least in here, so that you're not starting Alan Lazard in 3 wide. But I don't disagree. I think Gibson was better last season, but Lazard's the veteran. He's making a lot of money, and he has that connection with Aaron Rodgers. So I wonder if they're going to try to get him more involved again this year.
I mean, I hope he turns this around, but part of me loves saying I like a receiver, because one of the reasons is he has a big body, and then I think of big body and I think of Alan Lazard last year with the Jets. So that's why I was saying I don't think it's really the end-all, be-all size in a wide receiver. Well, what are your thoughts on maybe trading back later and going to – Domsey came up with a solid idea, trade back later, get a Guyton or Mims, and then take a McConkey, Roman Wilson type of guy in the second round if we can recoup a second-round pick. What are your thoughts on that type of strategy?
Yeah, I like it. If they were to trade down, I agree that I would attack the offensive line still in the first round and then look for a receiver in the second. Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, Ladd McConkey if he makes it. I really think McConkey has a chance to go at the end of the first round. So if for whatever reason he doesn't and he's there for the Jets in the second round, then sure, absolutely. But that is probably my preferred route, because it allows you to take a swing at both the offensive line and the wide receiver room in the top 50 of the draft. So I think that's the way they should go about it.
I really like it. I really like trading back, just because if you think, I feel like pick 10, it's no man's land kind of. If you think about, they're still talented players, but I feel like pick 10 marks the second tier of players that are coming in. I think it marks the second, like Harrison, Joe Alt, those guys are all the top tier guys. And then I honestly think you can get the same quality player at pick 10 than you can at pick 20. Pick 18, that kind of area. That's why I'm all for trading back. Select Troy Fautanu out of Washington. He could play guard and tackle. I know Fuaga can too. But if we could get a package to move back 5-8 picks and still get Fautanu, I like it. But Connor Rogers is all for the Jets taking Fautanu at 10 if they really, really like him. And, Connor Rogers has been saying all along, on Badlands with Joe Caporoso, on Stock Exchange with Trevor Sycamore, who was recently on the show, he's all for the Jets trading up and getting Joe Alt. Bobby mentioned it on his call. Could you just see the Jets going up and getting Alt, or do you think it's Harrison or bust for trade up?
I could see them doing that, and then I would be interested, like, what does that mean for Morgan Moses? Like, are you starting Joe Alt at right tackle and Tyron Smith at left tackle their first year, and Morgan Moses is your swing? Like, I get it. Like, that would add some really nice steps to the offensive line, and I think Joe Alt is by far the best offensive line prospect in this draft. So, I'm not opposed to that idea. I don't know how likely it is, because I think that Tennessee seems like a really good falling place for him at pick number 7, but I would love him on this football team. I really would.
Yeah, I really like Joel, and I had Ryan from Jets Talk 24/7 on the show, and he said Moses doesn't need to start, because he made a good point. Moses isn't even making starting money. He's not making money that a starting right tackle makes. He's making backup money. And, both those guys we brought in from Washington, Moses and Simpson. I like Simpson because, he really turned his career around last year. He was playing for $1 million, and, he was kind of down in Vegas, and he basically resurrected his whole career last year. And now we bring him in for cheap, and I think he's an upgrade from Lake. And I think I really like this offensive line. You have Tippmann, Simpson, and AVT as your interior. And I like Moses. I really like Moses a lot. I like Moses and Smith on the exterior. I look at Tyron Smith, and you couldn't have asked for a better blindside protector for Aaron Rodgers than another a Hall of Famer protecting for a Hall of Famer. And then I think Morgan Moses, I was really upset when we let him go because it's the most Jet-like thing to do. You let a player go and then they have so much success elsewhere. It's a rare it's rare that you see a guy like Jamal Adams leave the Jets and not have success. And I thought Jamal Adams back to the Jets made sense because we were in need of a safety, but normally it's the Jets crying to the player they released to come get him back, and now it's the other way around. I like to see Jamal Adams kind of crying to Jet fans to come bring him back. But Matt, thank you for joining us. You got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just really excited here coming up for the NFL draft. We're going to be doing our draft party in Farmingdale, myself, Ryan, and Green Bean. That's going to be a blast, but I'm curious to see what direction they go. As we talked, they have a lot of options, and I don't think they can go wrong. So it should be fun.
I agree. I don't think they can go wrong. Guys, if you want to go to the Talking Jets draft party at the main event in Farmingdale, talkingjets.com. Tickets are on sale. Everyone, thank you guys for watching. Smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. We're at 595 subscribers. We hit 500 last weekend. So if we can get 100 in a week, that would be great. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, JTS, Jets, Jets, Jets.